Hi and welcome back to the next video. This is video 27, and this time we are making a very simple component to display one single block entry. And herefore we are using, for example, the async pipe to subscribe to our data and to unsubscribe also. So our video structure is as always: first we have a look at our outcome from the video, then we look at the user story for this, and then we implement it and close it. So let's have a short look at what we are doing in this video. You can see it here. We are on our home page, and then we have all our cards. And if you see, if I hover over something here, we can see that our cursor changes into a pointer, and we can navigate to a single block entry. Here we have a new route, block entries, and then the ID. We could later also switch this ID to a slug, so that it's readable for a human. And then we have here our image for the block entry, the title, the description, and the author name. And we can also go to his profile. So we see his profile here now. And here we have the body, that is all the markdown. So you see it's rendered as normal markdown here. Let's have a short look at the story. So here we are in video 27, and the title is Add View for Single Block Entry and Refactorings. So the story is, as a user, I want to be able to navigate to a single block entry by ID, so I can read the complete article. I want to be able to navigate to every block entry from the home route. So basically we then have a new route, for example, /block entries / then the ID of the block entry. And we could also later refactor this to use the slug from the block entry that we made. And then if we are on our home route where we display all the block entries, we can just click on one entry and navigate to the single page. So our acceptance criteria are: we want to have a new route, the new component, and the service function for, of course, to display our block entry. We want to have a router link on our block entries, so on every card for every block entry that we have, so that we can just click on it and navigate to the route, to the new route here. And we want to do some minor refactorings, for example, just change a little bit of the folder structure in our code, or add a heading, whatever we want. So we can now move this to doing and switch to our code. And you see here we are on our branch develop, and we have nothing else running. So we can just check. So we are clean. And now we can say with git-flow feature start, and this will create a new feature branch based on develop. And we will name this video 27 because we are at the moment here, you see video 27. So we have now a new branch feature to video 27 based on develop. You can see this here based on develop. And so we can now just start. So we are here in our front end, so we can say ng-serve to run our front end. And we also have to go into our back end and start this, so that we can see anything or start developing. So this will now need a bit of time, and so we can go next shell and go also in our front end. Now we are here, and first we see we have here a lot of components. What we can do is we could make a folder for user, and we can make a folder for block entry, and then we can move all the components into this folder. So into our block entry, of course, there's coming the block entry, all block entries, and create block entry. And into our user, we move our user profile and users. And of course, we update user profile component. So what we have to do now is we see we have here errors because now the path changed where we imported all this here from. So we can, to make it the fastest, just delete both imports. And then we can just hit Alt and Enter and import them again from the new route or from the new path. You see it here now: components, block entry, all block entries. So this works, and we have to do the same in our routing module. and then everything should work again, or should compile again. So we can now go into our front end shell, and now you see it's not finding here all the stuff. And if we call again ng-serve, then it should find everything. One thing that we can do is, you remember we have our home component, and here we have our app all block entries. So this component displayed. And then we can just, for example, have here all our cards. And we could add here a heading where we say all block entries. And we can just wait until we compiled, and we can see that our backend started correctly and mapped all our routes here. So everything should be available. And if we go now into our front end, then you see everything is here. And here should also be displayed all block entries. Now you see it here. Could, for example, just say gets a little bit margin top, let's say 15 pixels, so we don't clutch to the navbar. And normally you do with classes and everything, but just for purposes to make it a little bit faster here, we just do it here, but normally you can give it a class and then add all your stuff. So the next thing that we want to do here is we now need our component for our block entry, or a few block entries, so we are here in our front end folder, so we can use our Angular CLI or the schematics to generate a component. So we can say G for Angular, G for generate, and C for component, and then we can say we are in our folder components here. Then we go into our folder block entry, and it should be called, let's say, view block entry, but with just one dash here. And then this generates this here for us. And it should also be imported into our module. You see it here, we now have it here. So this works fine. Next, we will need a route for this. And we can, for example, just go with something here. Then we add our new object and we say our path is block entries. And then we go for, with the two dots here, we go for the ID. And we call this ID the parameter. And then we need a component that we want to display. And this is our view block entry component that we just created. So if we go now here to block entries and we go for ID, let's say 16 from a block, then you see we navigate to our view block entry component. Now of course we need some logic, so when we go there we know this parameter here is our ID. So if we go with this against our endpoint, and there you can see it here in our postman, we have our findOne, so we can just go against our API like this with the ID, and then we get in return the complete block entry and can display it. So first we have our BlogService, and here we have at the moment functions for adding a new entry, so post, and to upload a header image. And for indexing also to get all. So the next that we need is a findOne, where we will just make this request here, a simple get to block entries with the ID, and then we get in return the block entry. So we can just say here, return, and say this.http, and then we want to make a get request, and this should be from the type block entry we return. And then we have our path. So the path is as we have it here. /API/blogEntries and then the ID. So we can just say here we want to have our ID. So for this to work, we need as an input our ID, so a number, and we want to return an observable. And this is just a block entry. So this is very basic, and this should already work. And what we can also do is, in our home component, we are displaying all the block entries. And what we want to do here is, if we are in our home component and we want to click here, we want to go to our view block entry page also. So we can just simply make here this to a class. We can just call this class card, whatever we like. And then we can add some CSS to this card. So the first would be that we just deleted was the margin top 15 pixels. And the second is, if we hover above this card, then we want our mouse cursor to change to a pointer so that we actually see that we are able to click something here. So if we go now over, you see we have here now a pointer. If I go beneath it or next to it, then we don't have it. So if I go on it, you see it changes. Now we want to have something happened on it. So very simple, we can just give this here a router link. And then we can say we want to go one up. And then we go for block entry. So what we just added here in our routing module, block minus entries, and then for the ID. So here we see we have our block entry. So we go here for block entry.id. And now we see, if I hit this here, you see we go against block entries and the ID. And now nothing works because we haven't implemented anything here. So we can now go on and go into our new component, view block entry. And so the first thing that we need to do here is we need to get from our route where we are here, from this route here, we need to get this ID to catch the complete complete block entry. So for this we will need first the activated route from Angular. With this we can activated route. We can get the whole route here, and then we can get, for example, the params from it and so on and work with it. And the second, we need our BlogService so that we can then request with this ID our backend. And we can use here actually the async pipe, so we can say block entry, and this dollar here is like a naming for observables, so that you can actually see what is an observable or not. So this is from type observable and block entry. And then we can go against this activated route. We want to have the params, and then we just pipe it and make a little switch map to end the observable and do something with it. So here we get the parameters because we pipe them. And then we can say, so we imported it, no, and the params also. And we just can say we have our block entry ID is from type number, and this is our params that we get here. And there we get the ID parameter. And because it's named ID is because we call it here ID. So when we call it here, for example, red wine, then we would have to go here against red wine. So this is always this naming here. So we go back here and change it to ID. and we have our ID. And now this complains because we need to return an observable at the end. So what we do here is very simple. We go against our BlogService, and here we execute the findOne, and here we need, of course, the blogEntry ID, so we can query our backend and get a response from this. We pipe this again, and then we get a blogEntry from our backend, which is from type blogEntry, and we just return it as an observable. So map will return it as an observable, and then our errors should go away. We just need to import the parameters from Angular. And now this like this. Yeah. Little structure. So here we go against our activated route. So the route that we're having here, we go against the parameters. So for this, and we get here our parameter with the ID. With switch map, we stop the observable, have our value here. We get our blogEntry ID from the parameters, convert it to an int, so we can work in this function with it because we want to have here something from a number type. And then map is not stopping the observable but returning a new one. So this here is the blogEntry observable that we say this is the type. And now to make it hot we need to subscribe to it, and we can just do it in our view because as you know, if we go for example here with our directive ngIf, then we can say we are here our blogEntry, and then we can use the async pipe, and the async pipe automatically subscribes to this observable here, and also if you leave the component, then it will automatically unsubscribe to it, so everything should be fine. And now we could say, as soon as this completes, we say we want to work with this as named blogEntry. So then we have not the observer, but we have the object here and can do anything with it that we want. To make it a little bit faster, I already made this CSS, or very simple CSS that we can use here. Basically, we have just our header image that has a width, a padding, border radius, and the margin to left, and a border. Then we have our card, this is 70% width, or the max width also 70%, and has a margin to top to 2%. And we have our main div, where it is a flex box, flex direction row, 100% width, and it's justifying the content with center, so that we spare a little bit of time. So we want to give this here our main div. And now we can just check that everything that we did works here. So we can say we have here our blogEntry now, so this value. And now you see we can access it because we have here the correct type blogEntry, and we also return the observable here blogEntry. So we can just access these values here. So we could go for, let's say, body, and then we should see here our test body. So now we can remove this here, and we can work us through displaying everything, but it's very basic. So you can always, if you copy or if you clone this repository, you can make it much more fancier. It's just one thing to see how everything could work. We can give this met card our class card that we made in our CSS, and then we have a met card header, and we have a met card content. So these are Angular material cards. You see they have a subtitle, title, content, and so on. You can just use these HTML elements for you. And then in our header we want to display our image. So we say we have here another div. We can give this div a style, let's say display flex, and we want also to display everything as row, so beneath each other. So then we have another div here, and this gets our image, and the source is our HTTP localhost 3000, and this is we can just copy this from here. So we have here our download blogEntry image, and this here is the name of the image that we are creating, so also a parameter. But here this is our API, so we can just copy and paste this route here, and here we want to insert our blogEntry dot header image, so our name, and this here gets also a class header image. And we have to close this tag. And then we can make another div where we display some values from our blogEntry. So we can say here we are having a margin left, let's say 20 pixel. And then we go for an h1 tag. This could be our blogEntry dot title. Then we can have a h2 tag. This could be our blogEntry dot subtitle. I mean description, I think, description. And we can also make an h3 tag, and this could be our author, and so we say this is our blogEntry dot author dot name. So these are all the properties that our model has here, our interface for the author. And we could also add a link to an author. So we say we have here a link, and we add something to it. So we say router link, and then we go to up because we are here on block entries and VID. So we go to up on one. Let's try. Then we go against users, and then we want to go against VID. So we say here it's a blogEntry dot author dot ID, and then we could name this go to author profile. And now we see that we can go here to the profile. Now we are here on users 9, so this is the user. So you see we don't have an image here because this blogEntry is not having an image. And the next thing that we can do is we can add something to our metcard content. So this will just be our markdown. So as you remember, when we go into our create blogEntry, we have here this markdown field from what we downloaded, or from this package, from this markdown package that we use. So we can just use this also here. And of course we don't have a form here, so we insert it like blogEntry.body. And we can remove this margin left and this width also, I think. We don't need this. And now we can look how it sees, how it's looking. So this is our test body, but to actually work, I think D39 was with some nice markdown. You see here we have a lot of markdown that I just copied here. So this is displaying everything fine, and we could also now log in and make one blogEntry with an image, so that we see that this is also working. So we can create a post, let's say example markdown, so that we don't have to type everything. So here's a markdown example. Let's just use this here. So we can copy this here. You see this is rendered as Markdown. Then we can upload an image, let's say just our smiley image here. We have our test title with Markdown in body, and we have our test description. Then we add our blog entry and save it, and now we should get it on the last page here. And now you see we can click on it, we navigate to it, we have our image, we have our title, description, the name of the author, so yeah, just ignore the things, but I updated it sometimes, and so I named it so that I recognize that something changed. And we have the link to our author profile page here, who is also not having an image, but yeah, we could change this. If we go to update profile and upload a new image, let's say this here, and now if we go again to the home, navigate to the last page, and now you see if I go through the author, we also have a profile image from the author, so from me. So here you can see we have our Angular card. We have displayed everything, so this here is the Markdown, this is rendered as Markdown, so everything looks fine. And now we can just close the story here. Or let's first check against our criteria that everything is done right. So we have here our story. We see we have our new route, new component and service function displaying our blog entry. We have added a router link for all blog entries card, and we did some minor refactorings, so we can move this to done. And we can stop this here. And here also. Yeah, this is the backend, but it's not just finding none of the files that I requested, because sometimes I deleted them and so on, because I was working a lot with these things here. So don't worry, normally you would have to handle these errors in your backend, but from time purposes I'm not doing this at the moment, so but we can do this probably later. So here we can say we add everything, then we say we want to have a commit message, and this we begin with video 27 so that we can later look at it and see when we implemented features, and we say added view for displaying single blog entry and did some minor refactorings. And then we push it to our upstream branch, so to our remote repository from GitLab. And when we have done this, we can just say git-flow feature finish and bring this branch with git-flow back onto our develop branch. And then we can also push the develop branch. So you see we merged it back. Oh, no, there were merge conflicts. Let's see. Yeah, I think this folder here is somehow existing, and the user one also, so we cannot change this, so we make this. Let's say. Let's go back to our feature branch. And try again to finish it. And now you see we have all the differences here from our code from the video 27 to our develop, and so now we merge it back into develop, deleted it, and now we are on branch develop, so we can git push this to our remote repository, and this should be it.